I'm Ryan Malyar, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Arts for the Masses. The arts are alive in Massachusetts, and I've been privileged to be able to bring you arts programming on this program since 2020 is when I started doing this program. It's 2025 now. I'm trying to do more episodes. I'm trying to line them up. What am I going for? Monthly? That's too easy. Bi-weekly? Let's aim for bi-weekly. How's that sound? We are now available. We're always available on YouTube. You can watch all the old episodes there. We've got some great ones. We're on Facebook as well. And now, 2025, we're on everywhere that podcasts can be listened to. So maybe you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Amazon Music. We're in all those places. If you like this program, please please subscribe, write a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Share it with your friends. We're talking about arts in Massachusetts and beyond. The masses, the Massachusetts, the people, everywhere. We're talking about Broadway, national tours, the arts in general, music, theater, dance. I'm here for all of it, and my guest is here for all of it. You're going to love her. Today we're talking about trends in theater as we're seeing them in 2025. My special guest is Ilana Ransom Toeplitz. She's a director, choreographer, writer, and teaching artist, now residing in the greater Boston area. But she's worked on Broadway. She was on the creative team for the Prom, the musical Violet starring Sutton Foster, Crazy for You at Lincoln Center with Susan Stroman. She did a ton of work for Theater Works. She knows your TYA babies out there. She knows it inside and out. She's also an assistant manager, not assistant manager, whatever I'm talking about, Starbucks? Maybe that was another time. Assistant professor at Emerson College. Hello, Ilana.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's
It's a
so
pleasure to
great
be
to have
here.
you. Yeah, just right off the bat, you've always got projects cooking, so what's going on with you?
Oh, well, thanks. I once had a mentor say that if you're a successful artist, it's like simultaneously spinning four plates. What am I doing now? What am I doing next? How am I feeding myself? And also life.
Oh, yes.
So right now I'm directing a few shows, including Head Over Heels at Emerson College at the Cutler Majestic.
Are you choreographing as well?
I'm just directing this one.
Okay, because you've got those choreographer skills as well. It's always fun to see what movement you incorporate into a piece.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, you've seen me kick my face over the years. I
I
appreciate.
have. Well, you do have that performance background as well. You don't have performer listed in your resume, and I know you started off in your BFA journeys as a performer. Do you not get out and kick your face anymore?
Let's just say this. I am a force to be reckoned with at karaoke.
That's great. And there's Broadway karaoke popping up all over now too.
Oh, thank goodness.
The Fitchburg Cultural Alliance or something has been doing Broadway karaoke. Just a little, I don't know if it's any good, but I just saw it on a
Oh, that's
Facebook
so
group.
fun.
It sounds
My friends
great.
and I have been looking for a new karaoke spot because Club
Excellent.
Cafe always has theirs on Wednesday, as you
Mhm.
know.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So head over heels. That can segue us right into trends in theater we have right now. And one of the big bullet points that you sent over to me was jukebox musicals. And these are not new. These have been around for a very long time. And I'm thinking back to like Leader of the Pack. That might have been one of the earlier ones that I can think of in my mind. But even like earlier on Broadway, a lot of these Gershwin shows that were created, like the Crazy for You, and Crazy for You was not originally a piece that was made at the time. It was pieces that were taken from all these other Gershwin shows, specifically Girl Crazy, and they said Girl Crazy is not good enough. Let's take all of the music from it and write a brand new book. So like these jukebox musicals are not going away. Do you have an opinion on them? What is your
Oh,
opinion?
you totally summed it up so well. You're right. They aren't going anywhere, and they've been a part of our social fabric for so long. You hit the nail on the head. Musicals sort of evolved out of vaudeville and these trunk show songs, like these Gershwin shows, where you would have these favorites like I've Got Rhythm, Can't Be Bothered Now, Can't Take That Away From Me. And audiences in a post-war culture were dying for a sense of normalcy and familiarity and nostalgia. And I think that works in a cyclical nature, and so we're kind of back there a little bit. We've just been through this in this global trauma with COVID-19. God, I'm so triggered I can't even say it. And we were so apprehensive to come back to the theater that audiences want familiarity, and if they're going to invest and pay $120 for a ticket, they want to make sure it's going to be really good and worth their while. So something they already know is usually a stronger investment for them.
Absolutely. Now I'm thinking, there are some of these musicals that I love. I love Crazy for You. That music is from such a different time that it never, and the book of that show is just so well done in a very classic musical theater sense that I never think of it as a jukebox musical. I love Mamma Mia. I'm proud to say that that national tour came through with Carly Sakalov, and it was phenomenal. Um, is it silly? Is it fluff? Absolutely. But it is infectious joy, and that cast is selling it. And I had an amazing time seeing this national tour of Mamma Mia. You're working on Head Over Heels right now. What are your thoughts about that show? And before we even get into it, what's interesting is I don't know the music from it's a piece compiled of someone's music catalog, but it wasn't necessarily music that I was super familiar with in that way that the ABBA songs are so on top of people's minds for Mamma Mia. Do you think that separates Head Over Heels a little differently?
Oh, that's a great point. I do think so. The Head Over Heels is the music of the Go-Go's,
Right, right.
which is so exciting because it was the first top 40 band to have the women play all their own instruments and sing their own music. So there's a real sense of female empowerment that
Mm.
runs deep in this show inherently. Then it's paired with this eclogue and iambic pentameter that's meant to give a nod to Shakespeare, although it's sort of written for the common ear to digest and think, oh my gosh, I'm so smart because I get that. So it's this great mix of old and new coming together to make commentary on gender identity and sexual freedom, which has been, again, part of our lives since the dawn of time and goes through the cyclical nature. And the show addresses that so beautifully.
And the book works. It's a good
The book
book.
happens. No, the book
And
works.
well, I'm thinking of another show that came after that, and Juliet, which tried to do very similar things. And for me, they just didn't work. Every musical number orchestrated well, phenomenal dancing, but in terms of a book and a plot that I was buying into, it left something for me to be desired. Um, but even before that, we've got shows like Footloose, which are taking a lot of they were taking a combination of some songs from the era and then sprinkling in original music as well by the same composers. I think it was Pitchford and Gore, uh, and it made this sort of cohesive piece that was a blending of both jukebox musical and something original. I think Footloose is pretty good too. It's enjoyable.
I
It tells
love
a
Footloose.
story.
Dare I say a guilty pleasure? Nay, it's a pleasure. I love
Absolutely.
Footloose.
So when do jukebox
You're,
musicals go wrong? What do you think? Is there one that you think, oh, this one just, I don't know. Did
oh,
you see the Britney Spears, the one more, Once Upon a One More Time?
I did not. I know that I was not alone. I know that a few other people also did not make it to see that show. I heard it was fun. I knew some people in the company. They said it was a blast. Sorry, I couldn't see it though. Did you see it?
I saw a bootleg on the YouTubes, and I couldn't tell who the audience was for, who
Mm.
it was for. It was doing this fairy tale pastiche, all these different fairy tale princesses essentially gathered together, doing like some version of some monologue show when they're all woven together with all this Britney Spears music, and I just kept thinking, who is this for? It seemed a little too juvenile, but then too mature for a juvenile audience in some points. So it was just all over the place. But once again, great music, lots of fun. Um,
And that has a baked in fan base. You have Britney fans who kind of don't care if the musical is good or not, who are going to come from across the country to see it.
right. And then there was that recent Huey Lewis and the News show, and I don't think that didn't do very well either.
No, Heart of Rock and Roll.
Heart of
And
Rock and
then one could
Roll.
argue that Back to the Future, speaking of Huey Lewis, has a few, signature soundtrack hits in
Oh, it
it.
does. Okay.
Yeah. Um, and I worked on Dirty Dancing, the classic story on stage, the national tour, and that show is basically just the movie soundtrack with dancing on top of it.
Interesting. So here we are. We're talking about Dirty Dancing, which is sort of an iconic, big movie, has big fan base. We're thinking this is a big moneymaker. This is an entity that we know we can make some money on. And here we are in 2025, and I've been speaking with a lot of different theater companies, and they're trying to figure out their seasons and trying to appeal to audience members. Post COVID, it's been a struggle. Everything prices keep going up to have your sets and your costumes and pay your actors well. And people are trying to find these magical shows that they can fit on their stage, employ probably as few actors as possible, and so that they can make some money on it, yet it has some sort of brand recognition. It's based on a book, it's based on a movie, it's an old classic. Is that what you're experiencing as well? What are you seeing, and what do you think is working?
Oh, you nailed it. Yeah. So theaters cannot afford to take risks right now. I'm a director of new musicals, so I'm always trying to develop and present new stories. And it just seems like audiences and theaters aren't ready to take risks on new stories just quite yet. They need to make sure that they feel comfortable with their audience subscriber bases. So you're seeing a lot of Footloose, like you said, a lot of Little Shop of Horrors, a lot of small shows like John and Jen, Title of Show, Daddy Longlegs, those smaller musicals that are less of a risk.
They're less of a risk, but then I wonder a show like John and Jen, or even last 5 years, these smaller shows, title of show, even a spelling bee, which isn't as small as you'd think it is, they don't, while it has recognition from musical theater fans like ourselves, audiences and subscribers don't know these shows. Do you disagree? There's always that effort of how do we
No,
then
you're right.
market and tell this story. So like I'm seeing titles passed around as well that are also like um tributes to Janis Joplin. You know, these smaller shows that are tributes to one particular singer. There's one that was touring. It was a Dolly Parton sort of tribute show with a very loose script. Um, they're trying to latch on to this to whatever audience they have and sell something. Someone was joking. There's an account I follow and about every theater this year doing Odd Couple and A Streetcar Named Desire, and I'm like, well, I'd actually like to see a good production of Streetcar Named Desire, to be honest, but will these titles that people are really praying and hoping for that will save the season? Oh, this has got to sell tickets. Odd Couple female version has got to sell these tickets. Are they going to? I don't know. Only time will tell.
I think you're right. I think theaters are looking for at least one ace in the hole known quantity, whether that's the music of the show, the artist who wrote the music of the show,
Mm.
or a local star. They need some sort of guaranteed entity to program a show these days.
What's the answer? What's the solution? Everyone wants to
Confetti
do.
cannons.
What was that?
Confetti cannons.
Oh, every show needs confetti cannons. Or they could do it like Blue Man Group and just sprinkle toilet paper all over the audience, and I'd leave happy. All the kids leave happy. They just gather it up. Oh, what a blast. You're working at Emerson, so in an educational setting, I imagine, or I hope at least, that there's a bit more freedom and flexibility in programming because you can lean into the educational aspect of what you're presenting. Finding a piece that's not as often done, or a newer piece like that you specialize in, creating these new musicals, and or is there still this sort of underlying ripple of having to sell tickets even in educational theater that influence what shows are selected?
Luckily, not so much at Emerson or educational theater because I feel like they know who their audience is. It's the local community, it's the students, it's their family and friends. So I feel like that's one reason why I think a lot of new work is going to schools for these sort of incubator programs. And in fact, we're developing one at Emerson College right now. And I've helped a few other colleges develop them as well. But a chance for new writers to come in and workshop their material in like a nascent, malleable phase on college students. It's great for the students and it's great for the writers because they don't have to hire a producer and pay, thousands of dollars for a reading. They can lean on the school's resources.
That's pretty cool. Tell me more about how things are from an educational standpoint. How are students being educated now in 2025? I mean, of course, I can speak about my education and your education. And I imagine that with jukebox musicals, musicals have not always, but try to emulate the current sounds of today. And we're hearing more pop. We're seeing the sixes out there, and more contemporary shows. Even the new Great Gatsby does not sound like 1920s. It is I'm talking about the Broadway one, not the ART one. Although that's pretty poppy and gritty too, if you talk about it. So, what is the musical training looking like at school? Is it a balance of classical voice and pop teachers? And how do you find teachers that can do it all? That sounds impossible.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot and it's important. If you talk to any professional right now, they'll say that when it comes to what they sing in their rep book, they're only singing pop music. Even for musicals, people are wanting to hear pop rock cuts. So as a result, at Emerson, their senior year, I teach a whole course on pop music, singing jukebox musicals, interpreting and singing pop songs. And then we teach a whole course on professionalism and business of show business and getting out into the field and networking because so much of it is, as you know, being a good human and being rehirable. And I feel like we don't teach that, we just imply it, but it's important to teach as well, especially in the last semester.
That's a really important and different spin that I haven't heard of in education, that you're able to put an emphasis on that education on being human, I suppose. What's that course even called? Or is it just sort of like this is part of the curriculum that is sort of embedded in many different course structures?
It's called professional orientation or the
Hmm.
business of show business. And it's a lot like Westworld. No, I'm kidding. It's it's a mix of lectures, master classes, and new artists coming in to workshop their material with us.
So you're working on pop material, a lot of pop songs. And I think of my BFA days, and it was always two very different mind frames of how you present a pop song. There was either the very sort of showy version, which is rocking out like you would rock out like the original artist on stage. And then there was this other musical theater version, which is internalizing many, many beats, seeing and imagining people, and fourth wall imaginings, and doing it like a traditional musical theater song. And how are you presenting and instructing your students?
That's a great question. I teach them both.
Hmm.
I think it's important. I think it's a spectrum. And the venue will help dictate which persona you need to lean into. I do this exercise inspired by RuPaul's Drag Race called Lip Sync for Your Life, where students have to come in and lip sync like full out with like pyrotechnics and glitter and costume, a pop song of their choice. And that's to tap into that like rock star personality while they don't have to worry about the vocal technique behind it. And then there's also the traditional jukebox musical scenes with the acting beats. And pop music is especially challenging because of the repetition in the music. And as you know, every time you repeat a lyric in musical theater, it has to mean something different. Otherwise, what's the point in repeating it? And then in pop music, you have, a lyric repeated 8 times as it fades out. How are you going to justify that? So it's harder. It's a harder lift for the actor.
And also just finding those particular songs that will also work in an audition with a piano accompaniment too. That must be difficult in terms of selecting repertoire for audition where you're not usually bringing, maybe some cruise ships or things you might actually bring in a backing track. But for most standard theater auditions, you've got an accompanist in the room and they must be appreciating playing these songs in 4/4 with 4 chords instead of Jason Robert Brown. It probably gives them a little break once in a while. But it's just like, but you have to find songs that are still interesting melodically and allow you to take up space in the room and show a part of your personality, right?
Oh, absolutely. And at the beginning of the whole course, we sort of have to give this like loving speech to our students that says these songs are not going to sound the way they do when you sing them in your car, in your shower, because you're used to the electronic backing tracks. But then you get to like a Billy Joel song or an Elton John song or a Ben Folds song or something that's made to be played on the piano. And it just feels like this like kind of sigh of relief when the accompaniment aligns with what's in your head, you know?
Now, what happens to those students like baby Ryan, who is just a baritone and couldn't do anything but like a very basic, Christian riff, something you do at a church somewhere, or, your little baby Audra McDonald's and your little Susie Soprano? What are, I would struggle. I wouldn't know what to do. That's not what my voice did well. So is there still space in a BFA program in theater for these sort of old school musical theater performers? I still see those old school performances on Broadway. I'm looking at Death Becomes Her, and that is classic musical theater sound, but still written really recently. So there still must be opportunities for people to keep their chops up and keep pursuing their best voice.
Absolutely. And so much of pop sound can just be generated by straight toning as well. And I believe, Ryan, that you have an awesome straight tone in you that
Oh, no, no, no.
no.
Always vibrato. Always vibrato. Um, yeah, always vibrato. That should have been my AIM screen name.
Always vibrato.
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's so funny. Have you seen any pop music, any jukebox musicals lately that you've just been like over the moon for or have just totally not responded to?
I'm trying to think of what else is new, like on the market for these jukebox musicals. I mean, my favorites tend to be the older ones. I love Ain't Misbehavin'. There was the recent production that Greater Boston Stage Company did, and it was a co-production with what was the other theater?
Your front porch?
It was with Front Porch, and uh, it was fantastic. It was so great. But even yeah, I love that show. A show I'll never be in, but I would love to, you know. And
That was a great production.
yeah. Um, what are some other newer jukebox musicals? I see some of the new ones coming out and they scare me. Like I see this new show coming to Ogunquit Playhouse called When Elvis Met the Beatles. And I said and in my mind, I mean, it just seems like a grab for an audience. And I just hope it will have some brilliant, fun, artistic integrity behind it. But with a title like that, it's kind of scary. It's like, is that the way that we're going for in terms of new musicals being developed, you know? So many
Yeah.
things being based off of movies and you know, everything. Things have always been based off of books. Showboat was based off of a book, but you know, what do I think of the Mystic Pizzas? You know, what do we think of the you know, the Back to the Futures and you know, and the Mrs. Doubtfires. And I think it's just all a grab bag. Sometimes they're done so phenomenally well. Like Honeymoon in Vegas, I think is so much fun. My Favorite Year, I mean, that's throwing it back, based on a movie. Amazingly fun, great score. Um, Color Purple, fantastic. You know, but this is all opinion, of course. This is an opinion show, but there's always sort of this worrisome zone of, uh, is that the right entity? That's real. Is this really what you're putting your Broadway eggs into this particular basket? You know?
Oh, totally. And I will say, like, now that I see trends creeping towards the millennials, I'm a millennial. I'm all for it. Market to me. Make me your musicals. Give me your Can't Hardly Wait the musicals. I'm currently working on Josie and the Pussycats as a stage musical.
That's fun. See
Yeah.
that, but that, you know, I hear that, and I say, this has a camp appeal as well. I think this sort of sexualism of these women and this very retro vibe that they encompass, without even knowing too much about Josie and the Pussycats. It seems like something that just sort of pops and becomes a musical. Do you know?
Yeah.
Is it a jukebox show or is it an original score?
It's a mix of the movie songs and songs from the early aughts that we
Hmm.
loved. So
Love it.
really like zeroing into that early aughts era that I grew up in.
Let's go back to school days, and I'm curious. You were able uh, to attend a lot of the auditions for prospective students that would like to attend Emerson, and you were at a lot of these auditions. I'm, you know, the standard audition packet that is being, does Emerson, are they a part of that group that does the sort of standard musical theater audition request where it's two monologues and two contrasting songs? Is it that are they a part of that standard group?
We are a part of the Unifieds. We
Unifieds.
require two monologues, one classical, one contemporary, two cuts, one essentially older, one newer. And we do a dance call, and we also have a musicianship component with sight singing, ear training, and basic pitch.
So knowing that your curriculum is very much based on pop music at this point, and are people bringing in pop songs, or are they nervous too? Are they not getting the memo? Are you listening for that specifically in as a favorable thing to weigh into someone's audition as part of their full package?
You know, it's interesting. I went to New York, Chicago, and LA as part of this audition tour, and I had different experiences with the talent in each city. So I think it sort of depends on which city you're in as far as getting the answer to that question. I got more pop music in New York and LA than I did in Chicago. I was always excited when a pop song came through, but for these auditions, I knew it was something that we would eventually be able to teach our seniors. So I wasn't putting too much stock in the pop music basket.
And you're auditioning students of so many different levels. We have students that are in New York or LA, I suppose, that have had access to training, that maybe went to a performing arts high school, that have had private coaches their whole life, that have been Broadway babies or done commercial television. And then you have students traveling from all over to these unified auditions that don't have the same access, whether it's economically or it's just the area that they're in. If they're in an arts desert somewhere, how do you how do you give an even hand with your selection process? Is it just based on the individual? Like, I feel like sometimes I can see someone who's very slick and very practiced, but I can also see the opportunity and possibility for growth in someone with that raw talent that can't be taught. So how do you balance out that this whole process of collecting a group of students that also have to be cohesive together in some facet?
Yeah. It's not gonna lie, a lot of rubrics.
Mm.
In academia, we love a good rubric. And we focus less on Eurocentric technique, like I was raised with, less emphasis on ballet, jazz, as that's again a very Eurocentric way of approaching musical theater. And we want to make room for the kid who has a specialty in salsa dancing or hip hop or just has a really good sense of musicality. So our rubric tends to focus on storytelling and musicality and making big choices rather than like how high can you kick your face. And same thing with when it comes to singing. I try to listen for placement and support and vowel shaping and knowing that we can eventually teach you those things. What does the promise of your sound like?
Something I noticed, I filmed a lot of pre-screens for students that had to. Does Emerson take a pre-screen before as an initial audition before they let a student move on in the unifieds?
We do have pre-screens.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of trouble with sort of the diction that I was expected to deliver on stage. And I don't know if I'd call it sloppy diction or just modern diction. Um, of course, it's very naturalistic because there's no affectation, but and I've taken the affectations of theater speech with me my whole life, as you can hear right now. So like, it's part of who I am. But I hearing it and not being as in the know of what coaches and schools are looking for, I was I was somewhat disappointed to not hear crisper diction and just being able to understand speech sometimes. Is that something that you've noticed? Is this a new trend or is this something that I just happened to encounter?
I think it is a new trend, and I think it might have something to do with pop music as well.
Mm.
Fiction
Mm.
is less of a priority in pop music. And as the art forms become more blurred, I think some of that trend is bleeding into our practice. What do you think?
Well, I whenever I've tried to do film things, I I have a hard time toning it down. And even speaking on a podcast microphone right now is not something that I do particularly well because I pop my plosives and I deliver theater speech. So, in terms of someone who is pursuing film, perhaps, I can understand being trained to just be as natural as possible all the time and letting whatever that speech is come out because your microphone is on a boom 2 inches above your face. But the trends in theater are also that everyone is mic'd now. So I'm thinking also we're in a time where when I grew up doing theater is in high school, we didn't always have mics, and if we did, they were really pretty crummy. It was some floor mics, and our directors were always telling us, it was like, Mama Rose, sing out, Louise. It was always, you gotta be loud to be heard. And the whole change, not just in the change in music, but also the change of text, does go for a more intimate way, and people are able to rely on the microphones in different ways. But what's
Huh.
lost? What's lost? The
And
flexibility,
I
I think, is lost. The flexibility that I never had. But are there voice and speech classes at Emerson that try to build up strength and stamina and approach a more standard American way of speaking, or even delving into dialects that might tighten up a person's voice or make it more presentable?
Absolutely. We teach voice and speech. We teach accents and dialects as well. And I think something we try to teach the first year that is, if no one can understand you, then no one's going to care about what you're saying because no one will understand what you're saying.
Yeah, clear enough.
Yeah. I hope it's something that isn't lost. And you're making me think also about the integration of how orchestrations have influenced the use of mics as well. I think as we've gotten into more synthesizers in like the late 90s and early aughts, again with the influx of pop music and pop scores and rock scores as well, but there's a need to, it's just impossible to sing over that orchestra, and you need that amplification.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the older shows were definitely orchestrated in a very specific way where it would suddenly dip down to just piano and strings when the soloist was singing, and then on that big chorus, in comes the drums and the brass and huge dance arrangements to fill it out in between. So now with having microphones able to carry a person over a big sound, sometimes we just live in a big sound world all the time.
We do. We get a lot of information a lot of the time very quickly. We live, and I worry about how it's affecting our attention span too, as audiences. I worry that we like really crave one nice tight hour 20, no intermissions now because we just can't wait to get back out on that phone and scroll again. I'm guilty of it too.
And
How about
so am
you?
I. Even shows that I love. I just saw a production of Into the Woods, and I was reminded, oh, this is a long show. I love this show, but it's really long. And unfortunately for my friends and family, sorry, Brian, I love you, but I do a lot of these old-fashioned shows that are very long. The Sound of Music, what a long show. The music, man, I just do shows that have the word music in them. And they're just they're long. They're good shows, but and then there's very little to cut. You still got to keep this show together, and you're not allowed to cut anything. That's the first rule. You can't touch it. So you're stuck with a long show with lots of music made just for scenery changes sometimes, as the case with Sound of
Yeah.
Music. There's music and crossovers that are written just for the sake of changing scenery. And now you're sort of stuck with Gretel crossing the stage with a candle for forever because they have to change from Maria's bedroom to the mansion behind the curtain. That's just the way it is till the end of time. Thank you, Gretel.
I
Thanks
mean,
for
you and I both know that, like, if you want a show that sells, there are two elements, and it's kids and it's dogs, right? So you put Gretel on stage with that candle if you need to, as long as you have to.
That's right. And you double cast her too, or triple cast her, because the more kids you have, the more family members are coming.
That's right.
I've been having so much fun with you, Ilana, but I think it's almost time to wrap up. And I do have this one new question that I've been asking my guests. And I was wondering if you could, of course, it's sort of stolen from another podcast, but it's a little different. And the question is, what made you say that the arts are for me? Whether it's your musical theater or just the arts in general, is there a formative experience or play or concert or movie that you saw that you said, I am in love with
Mm.
this?
I believe most of my answers are just like so basic, but also so personal.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was very privileged to grow up in an orchestra household. I'm a third generation classical musician, so I grew up with a lot of ballet scores, and I loved all of Tchaikovsky's ballets, especially Sleeping Beauty and the Nutcracker. So I saw a production of the Nutcracker at Pittsburgh Ballet Theater when I was in the second grade, and I just convinced myself and my friends that we were going to do the Nutcracker at the Benedum Center. I was going to sew all the costumes. We were going to have our childhood boyfriends play the princes and the mice and the soldiers. And that was when I realized that my birthday parties were just becoming opportunities to direct plays that I had written. And it was just sort of a lifetime of nerding out from there.
That's incredible. I do have a follow-up since you mentioned birthday parties. And I just gotta know, if you had any particular parties that were Broadway themed, whether it was a Sweet 16 or a Bat Mitzvah, was there a Broadway themed party? Because this is very important to me.
Okay, so the answer is obviously yes.
Good.
When I turned 12, I had, this is so nerdy, a karaoke party where we dressed up as what we wanted to be when we grew up, like our career ambitions, and then we made five, like 10-year plans together. And so, and then we sang karaoke.
You got to bring that party back because
Right? Like,
that sounds like
and then I
fun.
will say my bachelorette party, which is coming up, my my bridal party told me that there is a Playbill themed schedule that is floating around somewhere. So old habits die hard.
That's fantastic. Ilana, where can people find you on your socials and your website and all those good places?
Yeah, find me on the wild internet. I am at Ilana Ransom on Instagram and www.ilanadirects.com.
That's a good domain. How'd you steal that one?
I'll have to tell you later.
Excellent. Thank you, Ilana.
All right, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Arts for the Masses. If you are a local artist, if you're an arts organization, especially the nonprofits, the community theaters, the small little dance studios and dance performance groups, please be in touch. I'd love to showcase you. And if you're a producer, if you're a creative person in Massachusetts or beyond who has an interesting story to tell or an interesting take on what's going on in the arts today, I'd love to host you on the show as well. We film out of WMCT TV in Marlborough, Massachusetts, but we're always available via Zoom or different interwebs as well. Please be in touch. I'd love to have you on the show, and take care.